Jon, thank you so much for coming on the show. It means a lot to have you here. You have had an incredible career, particularly for how young you are and everything that you've done so far. It's fascinating. Um, you are the CEO of OpenLoop. You founded that in 2020. Grew significantly, particularly during the pandemic, as a lot of health tech startups and companies did. I'm interested actually to learn how it's going now post-pandemic and kind of what you learned through that period. But why don't we start with what is OpenLoop and how did you get to be where you are today?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you having me on. Right off the bat, OpenLoop is, for better or worse, a white label telehealth provider, if you will. So we help power the next generation of digital health entrepreneurs, brands, and organizations, all by offering white label telehealth services. On a more granular level, there's kind of four key areas that comprise this offering, if you will, Clint. So first, we've built and supply all of the technology to actually run and do digital health across the US. And this includes everything from like the actual core electronic health record, thing that stores patients' records, all the way to the ability to write prescriptions to a patient's local pharmacy, send for lab orders, order imaging studies, the patient engagement, patient support, the billing systems, the scheduling, all of that bundled up into this tech platform. The second component then of that is the staffing. So we also supply all of the clinical labor to our telehealth clients. These include about 16,000 docs, nurses, therapists, dietitians, health coaches, you name it. Third area for us is our legal compliance and sort of HR infrastructure stack. So all of the fun back office work that's necessary to go into actually running and seeing patients across the US. And then fourth and last piece of it all is our billing infrastructure. So we work with companies who just do cash pay services. We built all the billing and collection systems for that. But on the flip side of it, we also work with all major insurance carriers across the country. So we can bill for those insurance services, collect back from the payer, and then see and charge patients that way. So all that being said, been in about 4 years now. Like you mentioned, quick background about myself. Originally from Iowa, small little rural farm town, 10,000 people. Uh, Ended up staying around and headquartering the company here, not too far from where I grew up. But I left the state for a bit to go up to Grand Rapids, Michigan for undergrad. Studied sciences up there, knew I wanted to go into the medical field. Started a smaller drone company while I was in college there, doing a lot of like aerial surveillance with these drones right when they came out for consumer use. Grew that up and then sold that off. It was just a smaller business. Made my way back then to University of Iowa for medical school. Progressed throughout my studies there. Graduated, matched into plastic and reconstructive surgery for residency, and started down that pathway. But had simultaneously started OpenLoop as a passion project. Was going to run it on the side, and um, lo and behold, saw enough growth and traction with the pandemic that it made sense for me to jump into this full time. So discontinued any further clinical training and been doing this ever since.
That's incredible. So what led, like, how did you know that something like OpenLoop was needed?
Yeah, so from the idea or from what we do now, we went through a pretty hard pivot, I'd say. The initial idea for OpenLoop was just based on experience in the University of Iowa hospital. So I was seeing patients drive 5, 6 hours one way just to get the care they needed, and that was problematic. Patients would delay their treatment, so they'd come in sick, or they'd require more prescriptions, they require more surgical interventions. It was an overall, larger financial burden once it was all said and done for the payer, the patient, the hospital, everybody in the mix. And so when we dug into that problem, it turns out there's just a huge shortage of healthcare providers nationwide, particularly in rural areas. Accessibility is a massive question. So it it became this question for me of like, how do I take the pre-existing population of providers, the doctors, the nurses out there, but make them more efficient with their schedules so they can see more patients? How do we build in that efficiency leverage with them? And so OpenLoop in its infancy was actually a matching system. Hospitals would come in, say, I need the ER covered from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., Tuesdays, Thursdays, and then it would match them up with a physician or whatever provider they were looking for that was within a 2 to 3 hour driving radius around them. So tapping into the open unused hours that some of the clinical providers in the country have. That went really well when we first launched in early 2020. Over the course of 4 months, we signed up like 26 major health systems, signed up 1,000 docs, and we ended up covering about 700 shifts during that time. And then as the pandemic got deeper and deeper in the US, it just really shut down our market, Clint. And so, after that, we kind of sat around for the next 4 months, twiddling our thumbs, wondering what the hell we were going to do. And then ultimately ended up finding our way into the digital health space because it was dramatically taking off. And then, applied the same business logic there, but then slowly listened to our customer and added on all the other service lines after.
Yeah, what was that like once the pandemic hit? It shuts everything down. Like there's no, I mean, the whole world's different all of a sudden. So you spend 4 months just trying to figure out, hey, what do we do now, and how do we do it? And you land on this thing that actually is incredibly needed, which is telehealth. And where does it go from there? Like once you realize, like, hey, we have something that actually is going to work, did it just take off? Because I'm like during COVID, so many health tech startups just grew like crazy and learned a lot. Were you part of that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So the pace at which we were signing hospitals before the pandemic was just unprecedented. Um, and then there was just like one day where the lights flipped off and it was just radio silence. Like I couldn't even get an email response back from the people we were trying to interact with anymore. And so, like a lot of people, it reached, for us, it became this question of like, is this pandemic ever going to go away? If it does, when is it going away? And then what's the return to normal process look like? And so we were really hesitant to turn away from our original business model because it was working so well. But at the same time, we're like, if this continues to drag on, we're going to have no business left. And we had just gone out and raised a pre-seed round. So we were sitting on investor money, not putting it to active good use. And so, we made the decision late end of summer then, like, let's begin testing this. Like, let's see what it looks like to start working within the digital health space. Again, same sort of business logic, match the supply to the demand, except now do it within the telehealth sector. We started doing that, started taking off pretty dramatically. We were signing clients left and right. Then the big pain point became, well, hey, these partners of ours need to use our clinicians, but we can't deploy them fast enough. So we added the compliance and credentialing arm, all that back office stuff. Then our clients were seeing so much patient demand that they were on homegrown tech solutions, just non-enterprise, non-scalable solutions. So we built that tech layer over the next 12 months. That really started taking off. And then they were only doing cash pay clients and wanted to start accepting insurance, and they didn't have a good way to do that. So we built out this insurance based billing arm. So that's how we kind of got to this full rounded stack. But you're exactly right. On the back of a lot of these telehealth companies, we are their infrastructure provider. We are their clinical operations infrastructure. And in that, since 2021, when we kind of really jumped into the digital health space fully, we've averaged 600 to 700% year-over-year growth ever since then. I mean, even from last year into this year, from this year into projected for next year, like it's still a massive market. It's still continuing to grow. It's not slowing down by any means.
What does a typical day look like for you these days?
That's one of the things I got burned out by medicine with is just the monotony of it all. So I find this role to be very rewarding in the variety of things that I get to do and see and people I get to interact with. So my days are varied, which I do really like. But there is some sort of baseline routine. I prefer to work out in the mornings. I find that if I get up early, I can use those first 2 hours after waking up to do something mindless like workout. So I'll go do that in the morning, usually in the office by 7:30. Um, Throughout the day, it's a variety of meetings now. It really depends on the season or cycle at which we're in. If it's, hey, when you go fundraise, majority of the day is spent with investors. But I'd say on average, it's about 25% internal meetings, um, 25% investor board relations, both prospective investors, current investors, 25% is spent on sales or external activities, partnerships, large clients, enterprises that we work with, vendor management. And then the remaining 25% is free thinking, time to catch up on tasks, read news articles, figure out where the market's going and where we want to position ourselves. And then end of day, I typically like to be out of the office by 6:37. Um, Go home, grab a quick bite to eat, and then again, I like to do something mindless. So I love flipping houses, I love remodeling, I love working on old motorcycles, fixing those up. So something where I can still work with my hands like I did within in surgery, but it doesn't require all the brain power that running a team does.
Yeah. What advice would you have for entrepreneurs who are thinking about raising money? And what did you learn in your process of raising? I assume you raised from venture capitalists. What did you learn through that process of raising money that you would give advice to people who are thinking about doing the same thing now?
You got to decide what kind of business you're going to build, right? Like that's at the core of it. Somebody asked me this actually the other day, and I said, well, pitch me your idea. And they pitched it, and it was, I think it was like a fishing lure company, if I remember right. They were building fishing lures, and great product actually, because they like to fish. But I said, what's your strategy? How are you selling right now? They're like, oh, we have a few bait stores, and I'm like, well, you're building a lifestyle business. Um, at the end of the day, like you shouldn't go raise money. You bootstrapped this far. Continue doing so. Slow grow it. Like you don't have a patent on anything. There's no IP here. Like just work what's currently working for you. And so that's, at the heart of that conversation with them, it really got down to is like, are you building a lifestyle, long-term 20, 30, 40-year business that you want to run? Or are you trying to build something that goes national, international in the span of like 3, 4, 5 years? And you're trying to capture as much of the market as possible. Like those are two very separate businesses, and they both have two very separate game plans for capital. I said, if it's the latter, that's where you want to go raise venture dollars. Like if it's about growth at all costs and just speed to market, and if you don't do it now, other people are going to beat you to it. Good, go raise the venture dollars. And I said, venture dollars are a two-edged sword. On the nice shiny part of it, it's like yes, you're gonna get brand exposure if you raise from some of the name brand VCs. You're gonna accelerate your business tremendously quicker than you would if you just bootstrapped it continually. You're gonna get to that higher valuation a lot sooner, and it's just gonna give you the operating potential to go out and acquire, roll up, and just grow a lot faster, expeditiously. But on the other side, it's like, who are you as a business owner or founder in terms of mindset of control? You're going to lose a lot of that control. Sure, you're still the CEO, but you're no longer working just for yourself. You're working for your investors. You have fiduciary, you have a legal responsibility then to use that money wisely, turn that into revenue, at least give it your best effort. And so there's pros and cons to both sides. It really comes down to like, what do you want out of your business? Um, the things that I've learned is like you need to be incredibly selective with who you let on into your cap table. If an investor is demanding from the get go, chances are they're going to be demanding throughout the entirety of the life cycle. Um, in medicine, we used to say like you want a good nurse or you want a good assistant that you can spend 8 hours across the table from every single day doing surgeries with. Same thing is true in like venture, right? Like you want a investor that you can spend the next 7, 8 years, the entire life cycle of the business, working with, having phone calls with, because they're going to be there through the ups and the downs of it all. And so just being very selective, like you're building a relationship. It's almost like choosing a girlfriend, boyfriend, spouse, whatever. Like you need to be very closely aligned with them so they ultimately have faith in you and that they're going to go out and do good work for you too.
What do you read? What reading recommendations would you have for us?
Anything that piques my interest, as far as day-to-day stuff, Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch, Business Insider, Forbes. I just like reading about market trends. Um, because that dictates a lot of strategies. The greater macroeconomic environment tells us where we think the overall market's going to go, where consumer spending habits are going to be, and how's that going to affect our business. Some of the best advice I ever got was from a mentor within the first like week of me just coming up with this idea. He said, the best CEOs that I know, they don't worry about the pennies here and there of the business. That's for the CFO to worry about. But what they do worry about is understanding the entirety of their market, their industry, their sector, and knowing all of the ins and all of the outs of it. Where does money come from? Why does it come from there? Where does it go out? And why does it go out there? And so that's what we try to do at a senior level here is understand our landscape and what are the different levers that we can pull. Why are people doing certain things the way that they do them? Who's paying who, and what's the value created in there? Um, Personal edification books that I like. When I first started, I loved books on persuasion um, and sales. There's a really good one by Ryan Holiday called "The Obstacle Is the Way," and it's helped me reframe my thinking for a lot of different things. So books of that nature, Traction EOS, I really enjoyed. CEO Excellence is another one that I've enjoyed. Um, and then just personally, I love fiction. I like a really good plotline story. So Atlas Shrugged and all of Ayn Rand's books are some of my favorite. Fountainhead. Um, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. How are you thinking about artificial intelligence within your company? How have things changed since you founded it to now in terms of AI integration into your product?
It's a really good question, Clint. And I'd say a lot of investors are almost jaded by the prior blockchain bubble that happened, a couple of years back. Like crypto boomed, and then boom, you had all this blockchain technology that came out, and it was the buzz for a couple of years there. I think AI in its current form has some of that um, hype that will diminish over the next couple of years, but there is some core technologies in there that are not going to disappear and that are incredibly valuable. The way that we view it, particularly in the medical space, is a patient provider interaction is solidified and built upon empathy and rapport. That in and of itself should never go away. There always needs to be some sort of interaction there. The places that we're really leaning into AI is how can we maximize the time that a doctor or nurse or therapist actually spends facing patients and not doing everything else behind the scenes? How can I decrease clinical documentation times? So our CTO and team, they've built an AI tool that takes all of the patients' past medical history, takes their clinical intake form of why they're there, matches it up, and generates an entire summary for our doctor saying, hey, this is why we think the patient's here. Here's the top differential diagnosis of why they're there. Here's some treatments for each one. And then it'll finalize the note for them. So that way, whereas it took a physician 10 minutes to document an account after they're done, it's taken them 25, 30 seconds to review it and click approve. Same thing with like clinical protocol optimization. How do we get more patients through this pathway faster? There's also a lot of logistics challenges within telehealth because you have to have a doctor who's licensed in the state where the patient is located, even though that provider might be located in a completely different state than where they're licensed. And so scheduling overlaps, making sure you have the right licensure coverage across the entire US for the demand that you're seeing. Our AI tool actually drives a lot of that optimization for us. So all of the back office wraparound stuff, all the operational pieces that surround the actual core component, which is a clinician meeting with the patient. That's where we're thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Is it changing in your conversations with healthcare providers and hospitals and physicians and doctors how they operate?
Absolutely. I mean, just anecdotally speaking, our clinicians now have about 45% more productivity during their day with the tools that we've built them. There's always hesitancy, right? clinicians in particular, they've gone from paper records to now being forced to use electronic medical records to now being having to use different technologies within their day to day. And so it's there is hesitancy around it at first. You have to show them and prove to them that, hey, this is actually beneficial for you in your day to day. It's going to increase more of your time. It's going to allow you to do more of what you actually want to do. And if you learn this piece of technology, it's actually decrease the amount of other technologies you have to use. So it's been fun. There's been a lot of interest, particularly within our sector, because by nature these clinicians are interested in technology. They're doing telehealth. And so, a lot of them are brought up to us and saying, hey, how can we automate this through some of the AI that's been built? Or is there some sort of solution to this problem that we're facing? So there is very good communication between our clinical teams and our product teams, which has just been tremendous to see, actually.
What do you think about the current macroeconomic environment and just the current state of the world? As CEOs, you have to begin to think about that stuff in today's day and age, whereas maybe 20 years ago, you didn't really have to think about things outside of your company. Or maybe I'm misrepresenting that, but you get the idea. Like, you really do have to think about what's happening in the world around you, in the political sphere. I mean, we have an election coming up. I'm not asking for who you're going to vote for or anything like that. What is your current sense for where we're at as a country and current environment, and how are you thinking about it as it relates to your company?
Yeah. In 2021, early 22, I was sitting there and I remember vividly. I was in my truck driving to the gas station. I like real estate. I like the housing market. I just like following trends there, and stuff just kept going up and up and up. And I said, at some point, this is what goes up eventually has to come back down, and that translated into our business meant that there's so much extra money from low interest rates, from pandemic stipends, that our patients had extra cash in their pocket. They were willing to pay for clinical services out of pocket if it meant convenience and speed for them. And then I said, well, if that ends up going upside down, majority of people still have health insurance. They're going to fall back to wanting to use insurance. They're not willing to pay cash out of pocket anymore. So that's why we built a lot of this insurance-based engine on what we do, being able to accept insurance and allow our clients to piggyback off that to accept insurance from their patients. Taking that same analogy, I'd say that we are still going down, and we would be worse off if it wasn't an election cycle, is my own opinion. um, Towards election cycles, incumbents always prop up the economy a little bit to make it look better, to get reelected. Um, Stock market is soaring right now, but if you look at a lot of the actual trends in consumer spending behavior, going back to the real estate market, I I'm on Zillow 2-3 times a day sometimes. If it's just like 5 minutes, just it's personal hobby. It's like my social media. But the amount of houses now that I've seen get listed and they stay on the market for 2-3 times as long as they did, and then they'll actually get a price cut, means that inventory is increasing and the rates of before are the actual price points which they're getting before are decreasing. That signals to me that people are slowing down buying behavior, and we're likely gonna the economy is gonna dip. I just don't know when. And could that change if we have a switch up in who's elected? Absolutely. But some of those things are we're taking into consideration how we're planning out for 2025, 2026. Um, particularly in startup environments, whereas the past couple of years have been dictated by growth at all costs, we're much more focused on profitability, right? We operate a break-even business right now. I'm still being risky by reinvesting a lot of that profit that we make into growth to keep it at break even, but we can flip that switch if and when we want to. At the same time, I'm not investing heavily into operations, but I'm investing heavily into the biz dev and growth side. If I acquire the clients as soon as I get to a contracting process, then I know the recipe and ratios to go add operations folks. So we're phasing things out appropriately. but I am very much wary of the markets. However, that being said, some other piece of advice I got once before is it's a lot easier to pass 20 cars in the rain than it is in sunshine. So there is some risk involved in there. There's some things that we're doing that might be perceived as a little more financially dangerous, but it's worth it in the startup realm. You got to make some big bets to get the big wins.
Finally, we end every interview with the same question, and that is at CEO.com. We believe the chances one gives is just as important as the chances one takes. When you hear that, who gave you a chance to get you to where you are today?
Great question. I am thankful. Just there's more people than I can even imagine. First and foremost, what always comes to mind is just my parents. Um, they are not risk takers. They've been very safe and secure, but they provided very well for myself and my siblings and allowed us the security blanket to take risks, of which like I am taking. They taught us to be critical thinkers, and I think that's one of the most valuable skills out there. Additionally, my fiance is extremely supportive of everything I do, my hectic travel schedule, the life that a startup demands, and she's been supportive every step of the way. And then I think the last one is, I guess the last two, the employees that have joined us along the way. Right, it's incredibly difficult to leave a safe, secure job at a big corporation with nice benefits to take a risk on a mission-oriented, mission-driven startup and pour your life and soul into it and put a lot of faith in the team that's leading it. So those are the people that allowed us to operate and build this company to what it is today. And of course, our investors, they've taken a leap of faith and put a lot of trust and responsibility in us managing their capital. So,
Jon, thank you so much for joining us. Seriously, I'm so impressed with what you've built, continue to build, and I'm sure we'll be following it and follow up along the way. But congratulations on everything so far, and really appreciate you coming on the show.
no, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Clint.